Cemeteries hold stories that go far beyond the tombstones. Today, you're going to hear 5 chilling accounts from people who experienced the inexplicable in these places. These cemetery horror stories will make you think twice before stepping into one. Like in the story you're about to see, where a group of friends discovers that some games in the cemetery can have deadly consequences. But before we dive into the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying tales. Dude, I'll never forget that Halloween. It was years ago, but even now when I close my eyes, I can feel that chill down my spine, that inexplicable shiver. I was just a teenager, you know? The kind of kid who thought he was invincible, that nothing could scare me. But that night changed everything. Me, Jake, and Tyler were inseparable. We did everything together, from playing video games to pulling pranks around the neighborhood. And that Halloween, we decided we were going to do something different. None of that door-to-door trick-or-treating stuff. No, we wanted something more sinister, something that would give us a little thrill. And that's when the idea came. Explore the town cemetery. The cemetery was on the edge of town, kind of abandoned, full of old trees and broken headstones. Nobody went there, not even during the day, let alone at night. It was the perfect place for a Halloween adventure. We even dressed up in costumes to blend in. I went as a zombie, Jake as a skeleton, and Tyler, well, he improvised a ghost with an old sheet. We even stole some candy from my grandma's house to take with us, you know, to pretend we were just doing the traditional trick-or-treat. But we knew the plan was something else. When we got there, we jumped over the low cemetery fence, laughing and pushing each other, trying to hide our nervousness. The place was dark, lit only by the faint light of the full moon. The trees cast shadows that looked like long, thin fingers, as if they were trying to reach us. We started walking among the headstones, joking around, breaking some old, empty stones, laughing loudly to hide the fear we felt. But then things started to get weird. We heard a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, but we could hear it clearly. It called our names. Jake, Tyler, and mine too. Chris. Dude, I swear my blood ran cold right then. We stopped laughing immediately, and the silence that followed was worse than the voice. We looked at each other, trying to figure out if anyone had heard the same thing. And then the voice came again, louder this time. Tyler. Tyler turned pale. He looked at us and said, his voice trembling, It's my mom. We knew his mom was sick, had been in the hospital for weeks. But then the voice continued, Tyler, I died. Dude, I've never seen anyone as scared as Tyler was at that moment. He started shaking, and we didn't know what to do. The voice was coming from all directions, as if it were coming from the headstones themselves. Jake tried to pull us away to run, but Tyler stood still, looking in a specific direction, as if he were seeing something we couldn't. And that's when everything changed. Suddenly, Tyler exploded. He got furious, as if all the anger and fear he was feeling had turned into something much worse. He shouted, "Who's there? Show yourself!" and ran in the direction the voice was coming from. Jake and I tried to hold him back, but he was out of control. That's when we saw it. From behind a tree, Brad, a neighborhood bully who always picked on us, appeared. He was laughing, holding a cheap megaphone, obviously enjoying our fear. "You should have seen the dumb looks on your faces," he said, laughing even more. But Tyler didn't find it funny. He saw the megaphone and realized it had been a cruel joke. Before we could do anything, Tyler picked up a piece of broken headstone from the ground and lunged at Brad. He hit him with a force I had never seen before. The sound of the impact was horrible, and Brad fell to the ground unconscious. Jake and I stood frozen, looking at Brad, who wasn't moving. We approached slowly, and that's when we realized he wasn't breathing. Blood was trickling from his head, and I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. He's dead," Jake whispered, and his voice was full of panic. We panicked. What were we going to do? We had just killed someone, even if it was an accident. Tyler was in shock, looking at his hands, which still held the piece of headstone. I didn't mean to," he repeated as if trying to convince himself. It was Jake who had the idea. "We have to get rid of the body," he said, and his voice was cold, as if he had turned off all his emotions. We agreed, even knowing it was wrong. We had no choice. We dragged Brad's body to a nearby lake which was at the back of the cemetery. It was an isolated place where no one went. We tied rocks to his body with ropes we found in an abandoned shed nearby. It was horrible, dude. The weight of the body, the smell of blood, the silence broken only by the sound of water hitting the rocks. We threw the body into the lake and watched it sink, disappearing into the dark waters. After we got rid of the body, we stood by the lake, looking at the dark water as if expecting Brad to come up again, alive, and say it was all a joke. But that never happened. We waited until our clothes dried a bit, trying to look as normal as possible. No one said a word. The silence between us was heavy, as if each of us was carrying a secret that could never be told. We went back to the neighborhood, each going to our own homes, trying to act as if nothing had happened. The next morning, Brad's disappearance made the news. Everyone was talking about it, wondering where he could be. The police came, asked questions, but no one suspected us. We were just a group of teenagers after all. Who would imagine? But Tyler, he was never the same. His mom died a few weeks after that night, and he became even more withdrawn. He stopped going out, stopped talking to us. It was as if he had disconnected from everything and everyone. We tried to get close, tried to help, but he always pushed us away. He lived in that house, locked up, as if trying to hide from the world. And then, when he turned 17, he just disappeared. He ran away from home without leaving a note, without saying where he was going. No one ever saw him again. We heard rumors, of course. Some said he had gone to another city. Others that he had thrown himself into the same lake where we had left Brad. But the truth is, no one knows. He vanished and took with him the secret of that night. Jake and I tried to move on. We kept going to school, trying to live our lives as if nothing had happened. But that night marked us, dude. I never looked at a cemetery the same way again. And Jake, he started having nightmares. Sometimes he would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, saying that Brad was coming after him. We never talked about what happened, but I know we carry it with us, in every breath, in every nightmare. And I know that one day, it will come back to haunt us. Because some things you can't bury, they always find a way to come back. What a horror. What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion here in the comments. What starts as a simple prank in the cemetery can quickly turn into something much darker. And when you're alone at night in a place like that, terror seems to take on an even more real form. Like in the story you're about to see, where a night watchman in a cemetery will be confronted with something that can't be explained. I never imagined I'd end up working as a night watchman at a cemetery. Seriously, that wasn't in my plans. But after that mess at my last job, a misunderstanding that resulted in a forced transfer, as they called it, I found myself back to square one. And, well, when you need to pay the bills, you take what comes your way. And what came my way was the oldest cemetery in town. The place was huge, full of gnarled trees and ancient tombs, some so old that the inscriptions had faded with time. They say the cemetery was founded in the 19th century, and you could feel the weight of history just by walking around. But it wasn't just the history that gave me the chills. Over the past few months, there had been a series of grave robberies. Yes, grave robberies. Someone had been breaking in at night, ransacking graves and taking objects, jewelry, even remains. Creepy, right? Well, I was hired to stop that from happening again. The first few nights were pretty quiet. The silence was almost absolute, just the wind rustling the tree branches and the distant sound of a car passing by. I'd sit in the guard shack, coffee in hand, trying to stay awake. But man, the sleepiness hit hard. Working the graveyard shift is no joke, and I wasn't used to it. Especially in a place that felt heavy, you know? Like the air was thicker, harder to breathe. And that's when I started dozing off on the job. At first, it was just a quick nap, a few minutes here and there. I convinced myself the thieves wouldn't come back. After all, since they beefed up security, the robberies had stopped. So what was the harm in resting a bit, right? Big mistake. One night, I was there, sitting in the guard shack, fighting sleep as usual. Then, without realizing it, I dozed off. And that's when the nightmare came. A nightmare so vivid, so real, that I still get chills just thinking about it. In the dream, I was walking among the tombs, lantern in hand. The wind howled and I felt like someone was watching me. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. When I turned around, I saw an elderly woman, all hunched over, wearing a black dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She held a rusty shovel, and her gaze... Man, her gaze was pure hatred. Before I could react, she lunged at me, raising the shovel as if to attack. I woke up in a fright, cold sweat, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I looked around, still a bit disoriented. The guard shack was exactly as I had left it, and the cemetery seemed calm, as always. But something had changed. I could no longer ignore the feeling that I wasn't alone there. And worse, I was sure that the old woman from the nightmare, she wasn't just a dream. When I finally managed to calm down a bit after that nightmare, I looked out the window of the guard shack, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But that's when I saw her. The same woman from the dream in a black dress and wide-brimmed hat, standing outside, staring fixedly at me. Her eyes shone like two beacons in the darkness, and the shovel was still in her hand, as if she was waiting for the right moment to attack again. My body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. She was there, real, but at the same time seemed out of this world, you know. Like she didn't fully belong to reality. Before I could react, she took a step back and disappeared into the shadows of the trees. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to stay locked in the guard shack, waiting for the sun to rise. But another part, the stubborn part that always got me into trouble, forced me to go out and investigate. I grabbed my lantern and went out, trying to look braver than I actually was. The cemetery was strangely alive that night. Not in a good way, of course. The animals seemed to be in a frenzy. Owls screeched from one side to the other, and the tree branches creaked as if someone was climbing them. Every now and then, I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one. Just the wind and the shadows dancing on the ground. I followed in the direction where I had seen the woman disappear, near the oldest trees in the cemetery. The lantern trembled in my hand, and I felt more and more exposed, as if I was being watched from all sides. That's when I saw something moving among the trees. A dark figure, short, almost crawling. It was her. It had to be. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to hide the fear in my voice. Nothing. Just the echo of my voice reverberating among the tombs. The figure stopped for a moment, as if studying me, and then simply vanished, disappeared into thin air like smoke. I was starting to think I was going crazy, but I couldn't stop there. I had to find out what was going on. I kept walking, heading towards the grave that had been robbed a few weeks earlier. It was an old grave, of a rich family in town, and they said the thieves had taken jewelry and even some bones. When I got close, I felt something strange in the air. A pressure, as if the cemetery itself was pushing me away. That's when it happened. Something grabbed me from behind. Strong, icy hands closed around my neck, squeezing with inhuman strength. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I tried to break free, but it was like fighting against a concrete wall. The lantern fell to the ground, and the light swayed, creating shadows that seemed to dance around me. I felt the air running out, my vision darkening. But suddenly the hands let go. I fell to my knees, gasping, trying to catch my breath. When I looked around, there was no one. Nothing. Just the open grave and the lantern lying on the ground, illuminating a rusty shovel abandoned beside it. I got up and ran without looking back. I ran as if my life depended on it, and at that moment I was sure it did. When I finally reached the guard shack, I locked the door and huddled in the corner, waiting for the sun to rise. But one thing I knew, that woman, that thing wasn't just a nightmare, and she wasn't done with me. That same night, as soon as the sun began to light up the sky, I grabbed my things and bolted from the cemetery. I didn't give explanations, didn't tell anyone. I just ran. The next day, I called my supervisor and quit. He tried to argue, saying I was overreacting, that it was just fatigue talking. But I didn't care. Nothing in the world was going to make me go back to that place. To this day, I'm sure that woman was the spirit of someone who had been robbed. Maybe she was angry because I wasn't doing my job right, because I was sleeping on the job instead of protecting her rest and the others. Or maybe she just wanted to scare me to make sure no one else would mess with her grave. Either way, I learned a lesson the hard way. Never, ever slack off at work, especially when you're taking care of a place full of history and secrets like that cemetery. To this day, when I close my eyes, I can see her face, those shining eyes, the wide-brimmed hat, the rusty shovel. It's like she's imprinted on my mind, you know? Sometimes when I'm alone in the dark, I feel like she's still around, watching, waiting. This event changed me. Before, I didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, any of that. To me, it was all just stories to scare kids. But now I don't doubt anything. I've come to respect what I can't explain. And although I avoid talking about what happened, I've only told this story to a couple of people. It haunts me, literally. These days, I don't go near cemeteries, not even during the day, let alone at night. And if I see a rusty shovel somewhere, my heart races instantly. I think deep down, I know that woman is still out there, somewhere. And I don't want to tempt fate by running into her again. Creepy, right? The experience of being in a place full of mystery and darkness can mess with anyone's mind. But what follows goes beyond what is real or imaginary. Like in the story you're about to hear, where a man's job at a historic cemetery leads him to have disturbing dreams. Or is it something more? I work at the Pak Phu Lam Cemetery here in Hong Kong. Ever heard of it? It's one of the largest and most crowded in the world. Picture this: rows and rows of graves spread across a mountain like steps leading straight to heaven. Or hell, depending on your point of view. The place was built back in 1882, and since then it's become a city of the dead. And me? Well, I'm the guy who deals with the dead. Every year there's a festival called Qing Ming. That's when families come here to clean the graves of their ancestors, leave offerings, burn incense, and those fake money notes, you know? Money for the afterlife. The cemetery gets packed with people, but it's not a sad vibe, no. It's more about respect, connection. But for me, Qing Ming is also the most tense time of the year, because besides helping the families, I'm in charge of moving remains to new graves. And let me tell you, it's not just any job. Moving bones isn't just about picking them up and tossing them somewhere else. It's a delicate, meticulous, and culturally sensitive process. You've got to have respect, patience, and, well, a strong stomach. When I open an old grave, it's like opening a time capsule. The earth smells of history, of lives long gone, and then the painstaking work begins, bone by bone, fragment by fragment. Each little piece has to be collected carefully, as if handling something sacred. And it is, right? They're the remains of someone who once breathed, laughed, loved, and now depends on me for a dignified rest. But not everything is as simple as it seems. Sometimes when I'm there, in the middle of that silent mountain, with the cold wind cutting through the air, I feel like I'm not alone. It's as if the dead are watching me, judging me. And look, I'm not one to believe in ghosts, but there are times when the feeling is so strong that even I get chills, especially when the sun starts to set, and the shadows of the graves grow longer, like fingers trying to reach me. And it was on one of those days, right after Qing Ming, that something happened. Something that changed everything. But that's a story for later. For now, just picture this. Me, up high on the mountain, with a shovel in hand and a chill down my spine, trying to do my job while the cemetery whispers things I can't understand. Working with the dead makes you think, you know? There's no avoiding it. Every day I deal with finitude, with the fragility of life. One day we're here, living, laughing, loving, and the next, it's just this: bones, earth, silence. Sometimes I just stand there looking up at the sky from the top of the mountain and think, will anyone care about me like this 100 years from now? Will someone clean my grave, burn incense, visit me? It's a bit morbid, I know, but it's the kind of thought that comes when you spend your days surrounded by tombstones. But it was after I started moving the remains from an old grave that things got different. I started having dreams, and not those silly dreams like falling or missing the bus. They were vivid, so real that I'd wake up sweating, my heart pounding like a drum. In all of them, there was a woman. Her name was Leon K. She was young, beautiful, but had a look, how can I say it, distant, as if she were seeing something I couldn't see. In the dreams, she'd come to the cemetery. She'd walk among the graves, run her fingers over the tombstones, as if searching for something. And always, she'd stop in front of me and look me in the eyes. She wouldn't say anything, but I felt like she wanted to tell me something. It was as if there was a message there, stuck in her throat, that she couldn't let out. And then I'd wake up. At first, I tried to ignore it. They're just dreams, I thought. Stressful job, vivid imagination, who knows? But then came the part that really unsettled me. One day, while I was cataloging the names of the family from the grave I was moving, I saw it. Li Yan Fong. The name was almost the same as the woman in my dreams. Leon K. Li Yan Fong. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was too close to be a coincidence. I froze. My stomach twisted, and I felt that chill run down my spine when you realize something is very, very wrong. Could that woman in my dreams be her? The person whose remains I was moving? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every bone I collected, every fragment I placed in the new grave, I'd ask myself, is it you, Leon K? Are you the one visiting me? And the dreams continued. Every night she was there, walking, looking, silent. Until finally I finished the job. I placed the last bones in the new grave, sealed everything up, and the dreams stopped. Just like that. No more Leon K. No more of those piercing eyes staring at me in the dark. But, look, I didn't feel relieved. On the contrary, I was left with the feeling that something was unfinished, as if she was still trying to tell me something. And sometimes, when the wind blows hard in the cemetery, I swear I hear a whisper. A name. Leon K. After the dream stopped, I tried to convince myself it was all due to stress. Working in a cemetery, dealing with remains, the Qingming festival, the pressure to get everything right. It was natural for my mind to be on edge, right? I even researched it. Vivid dreams, nightmares, how the brain reacts when you're under tension. I wanted to believe it was just that Leon K. was just a product of my imagination, a projection of my exhaustion. But look, it didn't help much. The coincidence of the names kept hammering in my head. Leon K., Li Yan Fong. It was almost as if she had given me a clue, a little piece of who she was, but without telling me the whole story. And those eyes, man, those eyes wouldn't leave my mind. They followed me even when I was awake. When I closed my eyes to sleep, there they were, staring at me, silent but full of something I couldn't decipher. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or the afterlife. I've always been down to earth, you know. But this whole experience left me unsettled. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more of a restlessness, as if I had seen something I shouldn't have, something that wasn't meant for me. And the worst part is that there was no way to explain it. No answers. Just that feeling that something was incomplete. Working in the cemetery made me confront my own mortality in a way I had never imagined. Every day I saw what's left of us after life ends. Bones, dust, memories. And I'd find myself wondering, what will be left of me? Who will remember me 100 years from now? Will anyone miss me? Or will I just be another name on a tombstone, forgotten by time? These questions still haunt me. And even though I try to rationalize, even though I tell myself it was all coincidence, that it was just stress, I can't shake that feeling. Sometimes when I'm there in the cemetery, in the silence of the mountain, I feel like Leon K. is still around, as if she's waiting for me to discover something, to understand what she wanted to tell me. But I'll never know. And that's what intrigues me the most. Life is full of mysteries, and death, well, death is the greatest of them. I just know that since that experience, I've never looked at a grave the same way again. Each name, each date, each piece of history buried there makes me think, who was this person? What did they leave behind? And in the end, what will I leave? Leon K's story stayed with me. Not as a ghost, but as a memory. A memory that, no matter how hard we try to understand, some things will always remain in the dark. And maybe that's for the best. How bizarre. Sometimes, what the mind creates can be more terrifying than any reality. But, as in the story you're about to hear, when reality blends with madness, the boundaries of what's possible and what's normal begin to fade, as in the case of Jane and her disturbing relationship with her father's grave. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying our stories, so go ahead and like to let YouTube know you enjoy this type of content and don't miss any more horror stories. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but after that night in the cemetery, I haven't been able to sleep right. It all started with Jane, a childhood friend I hadn't seen in years. She was always kind of reserved, you know. We used to play together, but she never talked much about her family. Then one day she called me, her voice sounding like it carried the weight of the world. "My father died," she said flatly, as if she were announcing the weather. I knew their relationship had never been great. The old man was a tough guy, drank a lot, and, according to her, made her life a living hell. But death is death, and I thought she must be shaken up. I went to the funeral with her, more for support than anything else. The cemetery was one of those old ones with tall trees casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Her father's grave was in a secluded corner, far from the others, as if even in death he wanted to stay isolated. Jane stood in front of the headstone staring fixedly at his name carved in stone. She didn't cry, didn't say a word. She just stood there with a look I couldn't decipher. A few days later she called me again. This time her voice was different, firmer, almost determined. "I need you to take me to the cemetery tonight," she said without beating around the bush. "What? Why?" I asked, already feeling a chill down my spine. "I'm going to destroy his headstone," she replied, as if she were talking about breaking an old plate. I tried to argue, saying it was crazy, but she wouldn't listen. "He doesn't deserve to rest in peace," she insisted. And for some reason I still can't explain, I agreed. Jane didn't have a driver's license, so I drove. She got into the car with a hammer in one hand and some plastic bags in the other. I don't need to tell you the atmosphere was heavy, right? We didn't exchange many words on the way. I just drove, trying not to think too much about what we were about to do. When we arrived at the cemetery, it was pitch dark. The gate was open, but there was no one around. The lights from the lampposts were dim, creating shadows that seemed to dance on the ground. Jane got out of the car as if she were on a mission, walking straight to her father's grave. She knew exactly where it was, as if she had been there every day since the funeral. I followed her, my heart pounding. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the sound of our steps on the damp grass. When we reached the grave, Jane stopped and looked at the headstone again. This time I could see what was in her eyes. Pure, simple hatred. She turned to me and said with a calmness that scared me, "Hold this for me," and she handed me the plastic bags. Then, without hesitation, she raised the hammer and struck the headstone for the first time. The sound echoed through the cemetery and I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was wrong, I knew, but I couldn't do anything but stand there, watching Jane destroy her own father's headstone, piece by piece. Jane started screaming as she hit the headstone with the hammer, each blow echoing like thunder in the silent night. "You don't deserve peace. You never did," she shouted, her voice seeming to come from somewhere deep, full of anger and pain. I stood there on guard, looking all around, my heart racing. Every sound from that breaking headstone seemed to scream, "They're going to get us," in my head. "Jane, for God's sake, lower your voice," I whispered, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. But she didn't hear me. Or if she did, she completely ignored me. She was in a trance, completely focused on destroying that stone. as if each blow was revenge for everything he had done to her. After a while, her arms began to weaken. She stopped for a moment, panting with the hammer hanging in her hand. "I can't do it anymore," she said, her voice hoarse. And then, she looked me in the eyes and extended the hammer to me. "You finish it." I froze. "What?" "No, Jane, this is crazy. We should leave." She didn't like my answer. Suddenly, her look changed. The anger that was directed at the headstone was now all on me. She raised the hammer, not to hand it to me, but as if she were ready to hit me. "You're going to finish it," she said, with a calmness that scared me more than if she had been shouting. I had no choice. I took the hammer from her hands, feeling the cold weight of the metal. My hands were shaking, but I started hitting the headstone, each blow weaker than the last. The stone was already cracked, but it still resisted, as if it were fighting against us. As I hit it, Jane started laughing. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was something kind of disturbing. "That's it. Break it all. He doesn't deserve anything," she shouted, her eyes shining with a mix of madness and satisfaction. I was so focused on finishing it quickly that I almost didn't notice when she took one of the stone shards and cut her own hand. "Jane, what are you doing?" I shouted, but she didn't even seem to feel the pain. She rubbed the blood on her hand, and before I could react, she smeared her bloody hand on my face. The sensation was cold, as if her blood carried something more than just iron and salt. "He'll never leave us in peace," she whispered, her eyes fixed on mine. "But now, he'll know we're not afraid of him." I didn't know what to say. My face was smeared with blood, my hands were shaking, and the hammer felt like it weighed a ton. The headstone was destroyed, but I felt like something much worse was about to happen. I gave the final blow to the headstone, and it finally broke into smaller pieces scattered on the ground. My hands hurt. My heart was pounding as if it wanted to jump out of my chest, and the blood on my face was starting to dry, sticking to my skin. Jane was still laughing, but now it was a low laugh, almost a whisper, as if she were talking to someone only she could see. "Jane, stop. Let's go," I said, trying to keep my voice firm but failing miserably. She looked at me, and for a moment I thought she was going to refuse. But then she just nodded, as if she had just woken up from a dream. We gathered the pieces of the headstone in the plastic bags she had brought. Each piece of stone I picked up seemed to burn my hands, as if it were carrying something more than just the remains of a headstone. Jane helped, but she was distant, as if part of her had stayed there, in that destroyed grave. When we finished, we threw the bags into a nearby stream, far from the cemetery. The water carried the debris away, but I knew that wouldn't erase what we had done. We got back into the car in silence, and I drove back to the city, looking in the rearview mirror every 2 seconds, expecting to see someone following us. No one appeared. After that night, I cut off contact with Jane. She tried to call me a few times, but I never answered. I couldn't. Every time I saw her name on my phone screen, I remembered the blood on my face, her laugh, that destroyed headstone. I was afraid of her, afraid of what she was capable of, afraid of what she could make me do. To this day, I don't know what happened to Jane. I never saw her again, but that night never left my mind. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, with the sound of the hammer hitting the stone echoing in my ears. I avoid cemeteries as if they were cursed places, and every time I pass near one, I feel a chill down my spine, as if someone were watching me. I'll never forget that night, and I'll never forget Jane. She was my friend, but after that she became something more. Something I can't explain, something I don't want to meet again. What a scare. What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I've always had a fondness for cemeteries. It might sound strange, I know, but to me, they're like open-air museums. Each tombstone, each inscription tells a story. And the cemetery here, St. John's, is special. It's over 200 years old, and you can feel the weight of history just by walking through it. The trees are tall, their branches intertwining like bony fingers. And the silence, oh, the silence is so thick it feels like time has stopped. But there's one part of this cemetery that intrigues me more than any other. It's a secluded corner, almost hidden, where the graves are ancient, so old that most of the headstones are worn down by time. Many don't even have names, just numbers. Yes, numbers. Like 0578 or 1329. Nothing more. It's as if these people have been erased from history, you know? Only a code, a cold marker remains. Some of these graves have small flags, the kind that indicate they belong to war veterans. But again, no names. Nothing, just the flag and the number. I've always wondered who these people were, what they did, why no one cared enough to carve their names. It's kind of sad, but also kind of eerie. One day, as I walked through this section, something caught my eye. A different grave. It wasn't just a number. It had inscriptions, but not in Portuguese. It was Greek, I think. I'm not fluent, but I could recognize the alphabet. I was curious and decided to translate it. I took out my phone, opened a translation app, and started deciphering. The name was Dimitrios Karalis, and below it was the place of birth, Athens, Greece. The date of death? October 12th, 1923. I found it interesting, but what really gave me chills was what I discovered next. I started looking around and noticed that there were other graves with Greek inscriptions. And all had the same date of death, October 12th, 1923. It wasn't a coincidence. Something happened that day, something that killed these people. But what? And why were they here in this cemetery far from home with almost forgotten graves? I didn't know, but one thing was certain. I needed to find out. And look, I had no idea what I was about to uncover. I stood there, looking at those graves, and I couldn't help but think how sad it is to be buried without an identity. You know, these people lived, loved, suffered, and now they're here, marked only by numbers or inscriptions in languages that almost no one understands anymore. It's as if time had erased them from history, leaving only a cold, vague trace. It gave me a tightness in my chest, a feeling that something there was wrong, incomplete. As I walked a little more, I saw a grave that caught my attention. It was one of the few that had something personal. There was a small vase of dried flowers, and next to it, an envelope wrapped in plastic with a handwritten note. I bent down to read it. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. It said, "To my beloved Dimitrios, who left so soon, I will never forget you. Sophia." It was eerie and beautiful at the same time. To imagine that woman, Sophia, coming here, leaving her letters, her flowers. How long had it been since someone last visited this grave? And where was she now? But look, what really got to me was what happened next. As I walked through that section, I started to feel something strange, like that feeling that you're not alone, even though you know there's no one around. The air got heavier, and I swear I heard whispers. Low whispers, as if someone was speaking far away, but at the same time very close. I looked back to the sides and saw nothing, just the trees swaying slowly as if they were watching me. And the animals were acting in a way that made me even more nervous. There were some birds, crows, I think, perched on the highest branches. They didn't sing, didn't move. They just stayed there, looking at me. And the cats, oh, the cats. There are always some cats wandering around cemeteries, right? But these seemed different. They walked slowly, almost crawling, and stopped suddenly, as if they were seeing something I couldn't see. One of them even meowed, but it was a strange meow, almost human. It gave me a chill that ran from my spine to my neck. I'm agnostic, you know. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or supernatural things. But there, at that moment, I couldn't deny that there was something wrong, something that couldn't be explained. And the more I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, the more I felt that it was real. Something was there in that cemetery, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out what it was. But at the same time, I couldn't leave. It was as if those graves, those inscriptions, those invisible presences were pulling me towards something bigger, something I couldn't ignore. The atmosphere of that cemetery was something I had never felt in any other place. It was heavy, you know, as if the air carried the weight of all the untold stories, of all the lives that had passed through there. Each step I took seemed to echo more than it should, and the silence, oh, the silence was so thick I could almost hear the sound of my own thoughts. It was scary, but at the same time, fascinating. I couldn't explain it, but it attracted me, as if the cemetery had secrets that only I could uncover. Even after everything I saw and felt that day, I was still intrigued. Who were those people buried with numbers instead of names? Why did so many Greeks die on the same day? And what was in that section of the cemetery that made the animals act so strangely? Questions without answers, mysteries that might never be solved. But one thing I knew: there was more in the world than we could understand. Things that went beyond logic, science, reason. Things that might never be explained. And you know what's the most curious? I kept visiting the cemetery, even with all the strange experiences with the whispers, the stares of the crows, the cats acting as if they saw something I couldn't see. I went back, and I went back again. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something deeper, as if the cemetery was calling me back. Each time I went, I discovered something new, a nearly faded inscription, a flower left on a forgotten grave, a detail I hadn't noticed before. It was as if the place was alive, breathing, telling its stories slowly in its own time. In the end, I think the cemetery made me reflect on the nature of life and death. We spend so much time trying to understand what happens after life ends, but maybe the answer isn't in any book, in any religion, in any theory. Maybe the answer is there, in that silence, in that heavy atmosphere, in those nameless graves. Life and death are two sides of the same coin, and the cemetery is where they meet. It's a place of memories, of stories, of mysteries, and perhaps, just perhaps, it's also a place of peace. But look, one thing I'll tell you: if one day you decide to visit St. John's, stay alert. Because there, among the trees and the tombstones, there's something we can't explain, and who knows? Maybe it's better to leave some mysteries unanswered. So, did you enjoy this story? If you made it this far, drop a comment with "I see even in the dark." Seriously, I want to know who's on this journey with me. If the St. John's Cemetery left you intrigued, hit that like button so we can keep uncovering these mysteries together. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more stories like this coming your way, and you won't want to miss out. Look, there's already a video right here that will leave you even more intrigued. Click and join me over there.